Welcome back to SHARCOM 2021, everybody. I am Axington123 here. I'll be here for the next two runs. Coming up, we have the BPG13 or Viper Racing running Colin McRae Rally 2.0. It's going to be a quite fun run. We are raising money for three really good charities. We have a project Save the Children at 350.org. I believe we have a command now. And the donation links are all working, so if we can get those rolling, that'll be amazing.
Sweet, awesome. Right. Well, I guess since we're all good to go, I might as well introduce myself. So, hello everybody. I'm the thebpg13, also known as Viper to my regular viewers. Welcome to Colin McRae Rally 2, as Axis just mentioned. And yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I know that I think a lot of people have ran a lot of different games so far. Obviously, going through the marathon, there's going to be a lot of different ones. But time for a bit of racing action. So this is actually one of the games that I know quite a lot more than Shah, I will be honest. Yeah, long story short, Novice Championship consists of 8 rallies with 4 stages in each rally. And it's the standard cars category, this one. So this standard bonus. Quickly just explain, standard cars, there's 6 cars that you start with in the game, fastest of those being the Seat Cordoba. Bonus cars is any of the other cars that you unlock throughout the game. So, without further ado, I might as well get started with the run, and I'll try and explain a few bits as and when we go. If we're ready on the timer side of things, then I'll get started. So I'll give you a countdown from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so the first rally in the game is Finland, and it's very fast and a bit frantic. Now, one thing I will note straight off the bat, this game has a lot of shortcuts that we're going to be using throughout some of the stages, and I will also apologise in advance for the flickering sky. This is actually a direct draw issue, and the direct draw issue, for some weird reason, I don't understand why, but it seemed to be a corresponding thing. I don't know why. For some weird reason, just make sure this is working properly. I think I might have a problem with my controller again, actually. There's always one thing that goes wrong with all these things. See if I can get myself going again. Hang on 1 second. Oops. Hang on a sec. Might have a few problems here. Technical difficulties. Oh god, that's getting even worse. I might actually need to restart because this is just... For some weird reason, I had this problem the other day where the game decided to not pick up my game inputs. Just give me 2 seconds. Unfortunately, it did this the other day, so yeah, oops. I don't know why. It did, like I said, it did this the other day for some odd reason. Why it did it, I do not know. But hopefully we're all back going. I might as well start that again if that's all right.
Yeah, it's no problem. We're only a minute into a run.
Right, okay, we'll go again. Give you another countdown. Try again. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so hopefully, hey, it worked this time. Hopefully the controller doesn't go bust on me this time. So, as I was explaining, allow me to just kind of restart with what I was saying. This is Finland. It's fastest rally in the game. It's the first rally in the game as well. You'll notice as well that we have the flickering sky, and that is due to a direct draw issue. This is mainly due to the fact that when the game was first released on PC, not including the PlayStation version, just on PC, it seemed to have this weird thing where, obviously, if you were running at the time when this game released back in 2000, it ran on obviously Windows XP. Good old Windows XP, yeah. So it ran on that just fine, but for some reason in Windows operating systems after that, so I think probably Vista, Windows 7 and especially 8, 8.1 and Windows 10, it seems like there was an issue with the direct draw. And there is actually a fix for this. However, it's worth noting that to save my computer's resources, I actually keep the sky flickering. Now, as bad as that is for anyone with photoepilepsy, so I do apologise in advance. The only reason I keep this in is because if I don't, then for some weird reason the game cannot be captured. I have no idea why this is, but yeah, there you go. It's one of those early 2000s tech issues with the game. It's also worth noting as well that you will notice that the game is running in 16:9 and it is actually running at 1080p. The reason being for this is you may be familiar with somebody by the name of Silent, who creates silent patches for many games. I'm pretty sure even those that might have not even used his patches before will have probably heard of him. And he created a silent patch for this game when it first released. And it allowed it to run in a lot better resolutions than originally planned. Now, unfortunately, you can't go any higher, I believe, than 1080p. Like, you can't go up into the 4K range, so to speak, that I know of. Also, one other thing to mention right at the start of this run. So there is going to be a few shortcuts and a few cuts that I don't do compared to what I would normally do in a PV run, for example, personal best run. The reason being for this, so when this game was first started to have speedruns done for it, when it first started, most of the runners that started playing it were always playing the stages through, which is about what you'd expect for if a game was being run for the very first time. You know, you play it through and you wouldn't even bother of thinking of doing shortcuts, you know, things like that. So what ended up happening was they were using like the Peugeot 206 and the Ford Focus and using a lot of different cars. Now, my first run on this game was never on the PC version, it was on the PS1 version. So this game did have a PlayStation 1 version, also released in 2000. There was also a Game Boy Advance port that was released, I believe, a year later, or 2 years later. So you can get this game for the Game Boy Advance if you're into handheld gaming. And even, obviously, if you're into racing games and stuff. It's a pretty good Game Boy Advance racing game, I won't lie. That's not just for the fact that I played it, but also the fact that it actually pushed, in my opinion, it pushed the Game Boy Advance, not to its technical limits, but for a racing game and its 3D capabilities, it did quite well. So in terms of like where the game stood, there was actually 2 versions of this game, which probably not a lot of people know. So obviously, you know how this day and age, modern games, they always release and they're always like version 1.0 and they get patched up to like version 1.1, 1.5 and 2 and you know what I mean. They have all different versions. Well, this game actually had 2 versions as well. Now, this was only something I'd learned about in the last 2 or 3 years, mainly when I was doing speedrunning and looking into why certain versions of the game had a different car for the Subaru. So, out of the 6 standard cars that you can pick, you have the Subaru Impreza, the Toyota Corolla, the Mitsubishi Lancer, which I believe is the Evo 6, and the Ford Focus, which was released in 1999, or 2000 Focus, I think it was. The Seat Cordova, which is obviously what we're driving here, and the Peugeot 206. Out of the 6 cars, the Seat is the fastest. There's a reason why this car is the fastest, though. So, upon further investigation, and this was something that one day I was looking through information about some of the cars and just looking through like what a walkthrough of the game would look like, because obviously I know how to play the game. I've enjoyed it for the last 20 odd years, especially when I was a little kid and everything like that. So I looked up just a classic walkthrough guide, and turns out IGN had done one. I was like, oh, okay, IGN's played the game through. So I had a quick read through, and turns out they actually had stats about some of the cars. And what I was surprised to see, or surprised to learn even, was that the Seat Cordova car we are using has an extra 15 horsepower. Now, it might not sound like much, but every second counts. On most stages, the Seat can do a stage time around 1 to 1.5 or even 2 seconds faster than the next fastest car. Now, I would probably mainly put it down to the player more than the car, personally. Yeah, that's the reason why we're using the Seat and not the Subaru or any of the other cars for that reason. It's not just a case of, oh, just pick whatever car the player feels comfortable with. I am picking the fastest car and using the fastest car. Going quickly back to the version differences, though. So there was version 1.0 and version 1.1. Now, I think version 1.1 was the platinum hits. So you know like how the PS1 used to have the what was it, like the black cover for games, and then obviously some of them got like a platinum hits version or greatest hits in the States. So that was the version 1.1. So anyway, the version that I have is version 1.1. But you can actually find copies of the original version. The main difference that you can tell between version 1.0 and 1.1 is, like I was saying before, is the Subaru Impreza. The livery that is on the Subaru Impreza is different. So in version 1.0, they actually went with the traditional 555 livery, or the typical blue and yellow Subaru World Rally Team livery, which, if anyone's ever seen rallying, especially in the 90s, and those of Colin McRae and the cars that he drove, the Subaru Impreza and his 555 livery was very iconic. And chances are, if you ever thought of rallying, you thought of Subaru, you usually thought Colin McRae. At least I did anyway. But that was in the original version. In version 1.1, you got, I think it was a guy called Toshiro Arai, who's a Japanese rally driver. Wasn't nearly as good, but he had a Spike livery on his car. And the Spike, funnily enough, Spike as a whole helped create some of the games for like the Game Boy Color, things like that. So the more you know. So the main thing to mention here is that as we move from Finland into Greece, this wasn't just limited to the PS1. In fact, it was also something that was to do with the PC version of the game. Now, I've not managed to find version 1.0 of the original version of the game for Colin McRae Rally 2 on PC. I've actually got version 1.1. However, it is supposedly known that in other countries they actually have version 1.0. And the other thing is as well is that the car itself, the Subaru, even though it had a different livery in both versions, had no performance gain whatsoever. We looked into it and found that there was no performance gain. As such, it is actually the only car in the entire game that is actually allowed to be modified, and the run is allowed to be accepted. Because of the fact that there was no performance gain, it was in the original version, and you can bring it back into version 1.1. So believe it or not, the Subaru thing is actually just a skin. That's all it is. It wasn't the same car rebuilt from the ground up in both versions. It was exactly the same. They fitted a different livery, and that's all it was. So there you go. The more you know. Also, with all me doing all this talking and everything, I think it's worth mentioning at this point that we are now in Greece, as you can see. So Greece is a bit of an interesting rally, to say the least. It's very dusty, very gravelly, more so than Finland. But the one thing I want to mention, I want to bring to light here is that I think it was earlier this year or in the last, I want to say 6 months, there was a major cut found for this stage. Now, I won't be doing it simply because of the fact that if you can't get it, you lose about 40 seconds on the stage on its own. And in my opinion, it's quite easy to get to screw up if you're not careful. So we're going to play it safe. I will be using a lot of strats that I normally use because I can usually perform them, and it's okay if they go slightly wrong. It's not the end of the world. So the main cut that was found for this stage is right at the very start. You can actually go up a hill, drive through the bushes, and drive outside of the track. You can then cut through behind the scenery into like what it looks like a void. If you accidentally hit the trigger, your car gets respawned and you lose about 30 to 40 seconds. However, if you can get it, you can actually carry on driving around the track and finish this stage over a minute faster than doing it the normal way, i.e. the way I'm doing it right now. So normally this stage is around 2 minutes 50 to 2 minute 55, give or take, or 3 minutes depending. On average, that's just doing it the normal way with a few cuts, which you have seen me do a couple of cuts in that stage there and then. But when you use the main skip, the big one, like I said, you finish it in like 1 minute 35, 140 or something like that. The record for this category is actually 1:16:59 by a guy called Matik, and he used a couple of major cuts in my eyes. And that was the reason why the record is so low, is because he pulled all these massive cuts off in one go. Another major factor in this game as well So, I'm only going to name the first 5, but out of the original 5 Colin McRae Rally games, that's the first one, Colin McRae Rally, released in 1998, Colin McRae Rally 2, released in 2000, which is obviously this one, Colin McRae Rally 3, 04, and 2005, which were released in 2002, 2003, and 2004, respectively. Out of the first 5 games, this game has dynamic weather. So, say for example, I'll do a fair comparison. So between the first and the second game, in the first game, the weather will be exactly the same. On all the stages it rained the first time round, it will always rain every single time because the game's script tells it to rain every time. However, in this game, and this is not just limited to PC, this was a feature that they brought in on the PS1 version as well, is that what you can do is as you're racing around on some of the stages, say for example, you get to, I don't know, say you get to Sweden, for example, which is the 4th rally in this game. You get all the way to Sweden and it snows, and you decide, oh, I'll restart the game from the beginning. You know, I'll restart the championship. You restart the championship, then you get to Sweden the second time round. You may find that it's sunny. However, when you started the game in Finland, you found that it rains. So runs are actually a bit RNG based because of the weather. Now, in most of the countries, for example, in Greece, France, Australia, Kenya, I think that's it actually. Them 4 countries tend to be very, very clear. Like there's never even unless you had extremely bad luck, I've never seen anybody who's done a run get rain or really bad weather, you know, like fog or anything on these countries. Whereas in Finland, Finland I think has a 80% chance of it being dry with no 20% of it being wet. Whether that's all the way through or partly all the way through. So there's that. Sweden has about, I think it's 60% chance of dry, 40% chance it'll snow. In Italy, it's something like, I want to say 75%, and in the UK, the final rally in the game, it's like 90%, I want to say, where you get rain. And rain in the UK actually can cause you to be up to a minute slower. So really, runs can actually be saved at the end of a run. Say for example, also we respawn there to put us further on the track. So for example, you can actually save certain runs when you get to the end. So say for example, you are, say 40 seconds behind going into the UK. All right, you're 40 seconds behind. You've just entered the UK, and look, as luck would have it, it is completely dry in the UK the whole way through. You could actually pull that run back because it does actually save you up to a minute. Now, obviously, this will, of course, depend on driving skill as well. It's not just a case of, right, you'll gain 40 seconds no matter what. If your driving can pull it off, oh god, shouldn't have happened. Never mind. If you can pull it off, then you can really save some time. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get lined up with a run like that. It's quite remarkable, really. So, another thing I want to mention, whilst we're on the topic of stages and things like that. So in most of these stages, I won't be repairing my car, simply because of the fact that repairing the car does waste time. Also, every second rally in this game, so that's Greece, Sweden, Kenya, and the UK, you actually have, if I'm not mistaken, you actually have a super special stage. Now, super special stages, for those that aren't aware or have no knowledge of rallying, are a head-to-head stage against another competitor. See it as like a one-on-one showdown. You and your competitor are in opposite lanes on the racetrack. The tracks have several crossover points. In the later Colin McRae games, such as Dirt and Dirt 2 mainly, you'd actually have like jumps and stuff over the other side of the track. So it got more interesting, I thought, as as the games went on. But in this game, you end up having crossover points. So you both do a lap of the stage. However, thanks to a member of the community called Zorkov, he found that you can actually get disqualified, should I say, on the rally, and it will save you minutes. So, for example, here's how much time it roughly saved. So before this was found, the record stood at around 124.51, I think it was, or 124.53 or something, by a guy called Lucky. Zor found out that this skip could be used, and immediately we was like, that's major time save, because you can finish the stage in like 20 seconds instead of a minute and 20, a minute and 40. It was like, damn, that could be like 5 minutes time save overall. Anyway, Lucky ended up doing a time of, I think his first run was like a 122 something, and then the next run he did, his next PB run was like a 120. So it ended up becoming a race between me and Lucky to get the first sub 120 run. Anyway, as luck would have it, it did happen. Sub 120 happened. It was a 1:19:57, I think, or 58 by myself. The record then got brought down again when extra cuts started being found, and it eventually brought it down into the 1:18s. The fact that the record stands at a current 1:16 shows that how much the community has worked together, how many cuts have been found by several runners, and what really, I mean, even now, we're not at the ultimate run. We reckon the ultimate run is probably nearly a minute faster than that. Possibly. Not 100% sure, but quite possibly. You never know. So here's the super special stage. You notice we have a map at the bottom left. Well, we're not going to need it. So the way this works is you actually drive in the opposite direction. And what you want to do here is you want to make sure that you get the other AI to disqualify you. And the way you do that is by going headfirst into them. Now, here's something that might be a bit more interesting. So this doesn't always work. So what I end up doing, I'll stop about here. I usually stop a bit further on, but for the sake of things, I'll try and... What I do is make sure I try and keep up with him. Simply because that can happen. He can still go through you, and if you're unlucky, there you go. That can sometimes happen. So you can be a bit unfortunate, but what is that basically has allowed us to do is that has allowed us to skip the entirety of that one stage on its own. That saved about a minute and a bit. The faster you do it, the more time you save. Obviously, I wasn't as quick as I normally am, but that's how much time you save. Quite a fair bit. And we'll be doing that 4 times. The run actually ends in that way. Sometimes you can be very lucky and you can turn around and end up going through the car, or you can hit the car at full speed and the collision detection will pick you up and disqualify you. But it isn't always the case. Sometimes that's the case, other times it isn't the case. So that's kind of, it's like one of them, pray to God that it works. Also, welcome to France. France is a tarmac rally. There's only 2 of these in the entire game. There's France and there's Italy. In my opinion, France is the easier one, with Italy being the more challenging version. As someone put to me in chat, in my chat when I was doing practice the other day, Italy is just extreme France. And they couldn't be any more right if they tried. Because France, even though it's tarmac, and also the grip physics are slightly different because your car will grip to the road a lot more than it will on gravel. You'll notice at the start of this rally that we turned the gearbox down. So it is completely optional whether you want to turn the gearbox down or not. If you shorten the gearbox, it guarantees that you'll always max out. You'll always max out the gearbox no matter what, and you'll be able to slow down easier. And as well, by shortening the gearbox, you'll also be able to have better acceleration, which is great when it gets to coming out of a hairpin, i.e. like now, and also trying to come out of corners a lot faster as well. Not just hairpins, but most of the corners in general. So, in my opinion, the most testing rallies in this game are France and Italy, because they have some of the stickier physics, the stickiest physics in the game. And you obviously want to make sure you go as quick as possible. Now, I will say, the reason why I was saying about the gearbox is because you can have a longer gearbox, and it does come in useful for half of the stages. Like, for example, I could beat the stage 2 seconds faster if I used a longer gearbox, or the regular gearbox. But for the sake of things and for the sake of how I've done it for quite a few years, I'm using a shorter gearbox. But yeah, this is actually something that we're actually going to be using 3 times in the run, as in a shorter gearbox 3 times in the run. So France, Italy, and the UK only recently, by that I mean like the last year, uses a shorter gearbox. In Kenya, we always use a longer gearbox. In Australia, you can use the longer gearbox if you wish to do so. It's not mandatory to use that, but you can do if you want to, if that makes sense. You know, it's one of them where obviously we can recommend using the shorter gearbox for France, but if you want to, you can actually use the standard gearbox because your car will get through some corners faster. The problem is, as a lot of people who may drive in real life will tell you, the faster a car goes, the harder it is to steer. And in this game, that logic also applies. You might be going faster with a longer gearbox, but there's a good chance that you won't be able to keep up around the corners, whereas a shorter gearbox will allow you to keep the car a bit more under control, and also, like I said, will give you a lot more acceleration when it comes to going through the corners and getting out of, getting out of hairpins and everything. So you have to sacrifice some pros to make up for it in other, you know what I mean? It's like this, you have to make sacrifices in some places where you can make up for it elsewhere. It's one of those things. Also, actually, if we've got anything to mention about the charity, feel free to go right ahead.
We actually have just had a 25 Australian dollar donation from Ticker to b350.org. There are 3 different charities that you can donate to during this. Just do !donate, and there, and then there'll be a link. Click on there, then you have 3 different options to choose from: Trevor Project, Save the Children, and 350.org. So thank you, Tigger, for that donation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so
one thing that is quite interesting is how many of these sponsors were similar to like late 90s F1 sponsors as well.
Yeah, it's Repsol, I think, was on the side of the Arrows cars, if I'm not mistaken, at one point.
Yeah, it was 99, I believe, and 555, as you were speaking about earlier, was also on the famous BAR, the Zip BAR back in the day.
Yeah, it was, yeah. They actually made... So we never got the full livery racing on it in F1, but the 555 livery that was used on the Subarus actually had a full F1 car livery. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, so BAR Honda had, obviously, like you said, they had the Zipper car. But I think it was in 2004 when you could run a third car in practice. Back then, when you could actually run a third car. They actually ran the main 2 cars in the typical BAR Honda logo with like the white, Honda and all the rest of it. But the third car, which they ran in free practice, was in like the entire car was in like blue and yellow 555 because they were able to run that extra livery, and it looked stunning on track. It's just a shame it never raced, really. It was a cool concept though, the Zipper car. I don't think the Zipper thing helped, but when they had the individual car liveries on both cars, just the individual liveries on their own, one of them would have been enough to make me go, I like that livery a lot. Because the Lucky Strike and the 555 liveries separately looks really cool. But obviously when they put them both on the same, they put them both on the same car, I was like, right, we'll put a big zip down the middle. I thought, not a good idea. I mean, bear in mind, this is from a guy that I didn't really watch F1 that back then, but when I saw the liveries and when I watched the unveil, the livery being unveiled for the first time, you could just kind of tell it had that, like, oh, this looks really good, and the fact they got the Zipper car afterwards, it's like, no, it could have been way better. But rules are rules.
From what I remember there, it was a case of they intended of having both liveries on separate cars, but then the FIA went and the like TV licensing and everything basically put a stop to it because they wanted each team to be distinct, and having I think Zonta in the 555 livery and Villeneuve in the Lucky Strike livery wouldn't say to viewers that we were both from the same team, so it had to. But they'd already agreed sponsorship deals to have that on their cars, so they had to put the zipper.
Yeah, because I think one of the other things as well is that they had, what was it? So they had the zipper livery, but I remember there was a few other liveries as well that stuck out a lot. Which was, I think it was something like, so Arrows had two different liveries, I think in the late 90s as well. So they had the Repsol one, as we were saying before, but then when Orange took over, more or less as a title sponsor, the cars looked a lot better for it. I think like the livery changes can often look really good. I mean, for example, Mercedes changing their colours from silver to black, obviously for I think it was equality and you know the Black Lives Matter movement. I actually liked the car a lot better in the black livery because I think I don't know how many other people would probably agree, but I always thought that yeah, the silver works because silver arrows, I get it. But the black actually looked a lot more slick on the car. You know, like I don't know about making it stand out more, but the livery just looked really really cool. I prefer, honestly, I prefer the black livery over the silver one for like this year. But the thing is, though, going back to what you were saying, I think yeah, it was to do with the fact that you couldn't identify which driver was on which team. And the thing is, if they let that slide, you obviously know that things like other teams would have probably started going, well, if they're running a different livery, why don't we run a different livery? And it would have caused mass confusion, I'm sure. Just a shame it never prevailed, but what can you do? Would have been nice to see.
Another example, like the sponsorship, was the pink Panther cars for the last couple of years before Aston Martin came in.
That's another thing. It's how they turned a pink car into a green one. Like obviously it's just a lick of paint, but it seems weird to have another car on the grid. I'm personally a fan of Aston Martin and the livery, but not a fan of the pink bits on it. I was like, if you got as soon as it got unveiled, I was like, I like the green. It could be a bit of a darker shade of green, in my opinion, but the pink just ruined it. Because I don't ever remember someone going, I like a green car with loads of pink. I think them two colours just don't mix, personally. And for me, it kind of ruined the look of it, but that's just me.
Yeah, I kind of agree there. I think when it was just the pink car, that was pretty nice because I believe it was because of BWT Waters.
Yeah, it was.
And obviously they're still a side sponsor, so they needed the little lick of pink, but it just looks weird with green.
Yeah, it's weird flavours, that's for sure. Speaking of colours that don't go together, let's try two colours that do go together. Sweden, Swedish flag, blue and yellow. Sweden is a rally that, in past games, I'll be honest, I never liked the Swedish rally in any of the rally games that I played, but it has kind of grown on me a little bit. It's not my favourite rally, I will be honest, but when I was younger, every time I played Colin McRae rally, or a rally game for that matter, Sweden was always the one I left till last for one reason: snow. And I never thought it was ever a good rally. Like I thought the spectacle of it was okay, but with all the snow, I was like, yeah, it's not that good. However, over time and playing it, visiting the country and everything, the one thing that I will have to mention is that Sweden's actually a really fast rally in real life, and I thought, that's interesting. You wouldn't ever think so. It is one of those rallies where it can get faster without being faster. You know, like you think, oh, a load of snow, it'll slow you down, but no, there's a lot more to it than there is. Oh, we have a question. Did Shah get me into racing game speedruns or vice versa? So Shah was an interesting one. I won't spill all the details, but with Shah, it was actually one of my first ever speedruns. In terms of getting me into racing game speedruns, I think that came about through... I don't think Shah got me into racing game speedruns. I think Shah was, to me, it was its own thing because I when I was first looking into speedrunning for the first time, I had no idea what to go for. And SHA at the time seemed like a really cool thing to try out. Because I was like, oh yeah, I used to love playing SHA when I was a kid. I think as a lot of people here probably did as well, and hence the reason why the community is so active and modding is so active. But for me, it was more just a case of, I would say, like most games that I've done speedruns of, nostalgia, and my enjoyment of playing it. And in terms of like with the racing game stuff, that's the racing game stuff mainly came about because I played a lot of racing games, a lot of driving games as a kid, and I think I've always been a car fanatic. Like, this is it. It's like, so when I was younger, my mum and dad bought me a PlayStation 1 for Christmas. So I don't know how old I was, but the first few games I had for it was obviously like the original Crash Bandicoot, Colin McRae Rally 1, Colin McRae Rally 2, Driver 1, Driver 2, V Rally, for example. And from there, that was how I really got into racing games. And obviously, because I stayed playing a lot of racing games over the years, I felt like it was best to go into, when it came to speedruns anyway, to go into racing games. SHA mainly came about because of, like I said, nostalgia reasons. And this game actually holds a significant place for me where I stand in speedrunning terms, because I went on I think I did a few runs of SHA back in 2014, I believe it was, when I first really started doing runs. And a blind run of Sleeping Dogs, but we don't really talk about that. But then after that, I remember leaving speedrunning alone. Wouldn't even class myself as a speedrunner back then. Also, before I carry on finishing what we're saying, so we do something in Sweden called the ice skip, which basically involves us flipping the car over like this, and this actually spawns us further on the stage. We're going to do it again in a second, but this actually saves all of the ice segment, which you can see around me. This saves around, I believe, like 30 or 40 seconds or something. So, yeah, the more you know. See if I can flip the car over. There we go. I don't know where it's going to put me. It put me on the right part of the track, that's fine. Sweet. But yeah, in terms of like where I stood with racing games and everything like that, it mainly came down to the fact that after I did a couple of runs of SHA back in 2014, I think it was August 2014, I was studying at college at the time, so I ended up putting things down and focusing more on college, and I was still doing gaming and things like that. And then it was a case of doing YouTube videos and so on. But then I remembered that when I was in college, especially in like 2016, which I was doing a uni degree by then, that I thought, I used to do speedrun. I was like, whatever happened to me doing speedruns? I've not done a speedrun for ages. So I ended up looking into some games that I used to run, and I think at the time it was Speedruns Live that I didn't really know of speedrun.com back then. So I remember looking on Speedruns Live, and I was looking on games that were like A to Z, and I was like, I wonder if Colin McRae Rally's got one. It probably hasn't, but it's worth a try. So I had a look. Yep, there was the leaderboard for Colin McRae Rally 2. It's there. What about Driver? Yep, Driver's got one. So that immediately I was like looking straight away, like looking at games that I used to love playing and things like that, and seeing what speedruns they were. And no doubt, there was no shadow of a doubt which direction I wanted to go in and which game I wanted to start playing and doing a speedrun of. And it was this game. This was the first one I did. So I think it was, I want to say either late 2016 or early 2017, if you can call it a resurgence, or speedrunning part 2 happened. Yeah, I got back into speedruns, and I ended up kind of not leaving my YouTube channel behind in its entirety, but I ended up just stopping YouTube entirely, switching over to Twitch and doing streaming, and speedrunning ended up becoming my main hobby and my main interest. Obviously, gaming is still within my main interest, of course, but speedrunning and marathons and things like that, that's more what I would call my hobby now. That's more my main hobby. You try explaining that to somebody who doesn't know what speedrunning is, you always find that they have a confused look on their face, which I always laugh at, to be honest. I mean, take, for example, ESA, for example. It's in Sweden, it's an in-person event usually. And when I told somebody once that I went to Sweden for an event, like, oh, right, so it's like a convention, I was like, kinda? I'm like, I don't know what to call it. I got to, like, now I've got to think, well, there's no other way of explaining it. It's a speedrunning event. Like, sorry, what's speedrunning? So you have to try and explain what it is, other than saying you beat a game from point A to point B, which is pretty much what I can think of when I think speedrunning, a definition. But they always have that confused look on the face, like, huh? Then you have to show them, like, people have timers, and yeah, it gets a bit confusing for some people. Some people won't get it, and that's understandable. But it's interesting as well because, you know, I have family support behind it, and the other thing is as well is that events such as online events and in-person events, they do you a lot of good, I think. To not just to get your name out there for the most part, but also to meet new people and to, you know, to just meet people who, even if they don't do the same speedruns as you, you know, at the end of the day, when it comes to speedrunning, you more or less are looking at the main perspective, not the whole, right, does somebody do, like, for looking from my perspective, right, does somebody do a racing game speedrun same as me? No, okay, I can't be friends with them. You can still be friends with somebody no matter what speedruns they do, and still get to know somebody that way. But yeah, it's there's a, like I said, it's a lot of funny times as well when you meet somebody new for the first time. And for example, I've actually been quite fortunate that I got somebody into speedrunning, and he's still going now. So I want to make sure I don't hit many of these trees. Thank you very much. Sweet. So there was a guy that actually turned up to a UKSG event. So UKSG is usually a annual event, sorry, a bi-monthly event. It's usually held 3 or 4 times a year in Glasgow in Scotland. And there was a guy that turned up, and he seemed very nervous and had no idea what was going on. He just thought, oh, it'd be an interesting event to go to. And I guess he'd heard about it off somebody and all the rest of it. And he turns up at this event and he introduced himself as Tim. So this Tim I got to know over the course of like a day or two, but he seemed very nervous. And not long after that, he ended up starting doing speedruns of his own. And I remember, like, he's a really nice guy. I'm still friends with him now, and it was his first time that he'd ever been to a speedrun event in person. He didn't know that we did online events or anything, I don't think. Although I could be wrong with saying that, so I think that's something that he could definitely testify to. So yeah, he ends up by asking me how does speedrunning work and things like that. So there we go, nice. And yeah, he really got into it, and it was nice that I managed to, I won't say inspire, but, you know, encourage someone to give it a go. And he said, oh, so you're into racing games and things like that? And I said, yeah. Anyway, so we still haven't done it yet, but we have plans to do like a co-op racing game together. And Tim is what I would consider a bit of an old school gamer. So like he's into like ZX Spectrum, that sort of stuff. That's his main forte. Obviously, he plays a bit more of the modern stuff, but, you know, I class him as an old school gamer. He probably wouldn't like that name, but I would personally. But yeah, he's a great guy, and like I said, I'm quite happy that I was able to do that. But this is the sort of thing that you can get through events and doing speedrun in general. You know, and obviously, granted, you've obviously got several communities that have had a rise and have fallen and everything, and, you know, that have had several head moderators and things like that. But at the end of the day, I feel like that's now it's something that's always going to happen. I mean, speedrunning really with the community is kind of, it's like having a group of friends. You're bound to have a fallout somewhere. You know, no matter how hard you try, you will always have something that'll slip through the cracks. But that's what communities are there for. They're there to make sure that these cracks don't appear, and if cracks do appear, to fix them up as best as they can and to repair them. And again, like I said, going back to speedrunning as a whole, it's one of those situations where, like I said, you can meet new people, and I'll be honest, speedrunning for me has impacted my life a lot more than I actually imagine. I personally didn't think that speedrunning, okay, maybe impacting is too strong a word, but affecting, I guess, I don't know. But, you know, I feel like it's one of those things where, you know, I've met so many great people through so many events and communities and things like that. And even better than that, you know, we've even met up outside of these events. I mean, obviously, the events is what we all go to, what we collaborate at. But we've actually met up outside of some events. And it's great because that shows that there's a bit more than just the event part of it. You know, for example, there's guys that I know that have been to ESA and been to UKSG. I met them first at UKSG, and you know, I had like a Christmas party a couple of years ago, and you know, I invited them, and they made the effort to come and turned up. And it's the same. Like recently, I've been to. I will kind of spill the beans with this one, but a guy that is in the UKSG group recently got married, and he invited some of the guys from UKSG, myself included. Now, bear in mind, at this wedding, I won't say too much because I don't know how much I can and can't say, but a lot of friends that he knew that was there that he'd invited were friends from obviously college, from uni. There was actually a bunch of guys that I've met that he'd invited from Xbox Live through talking to them through there and find out that they lived not far away. And obviously he invited us and myself and a few of the other guys from UKSG. And bear in mind, this guy in question, I've only known him for about 4 and a bit years, but the fact that he invited me shows how much of a great friendship we built up. Thanks to speedrunning, thanks to events and everything. And it just kind of shows you, you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's, you know, speedrunning is definitely one of those things. But to kind of bring it back to this game a little bit, I know that I've been talking for at least half of these stages and I've not even explained much about the run. But you'll notice that I have been cutting a lot of corners. This is simply because of the fact that was actually a really good save. That's mainly because of the fact that it's become like clockwork when I'm learning a lot of these little cuts and things like that. As I said before, there are a lot of cuts here that I won't be doing, simply because I feel like they are not safe for a marathon. So a lot of these will be a case of doing these off the top of my head and what I normally do. So yeah, make of it what you will. It's also worth noting, I believe my estimate for this was 125. That might be a bit too conservative because I feel like this might finish in under 120, possibly. Depending, give or take, seeing what happens. And it is worth mentioning as well, again, just to bring your mind back to what I was saying about the weather before, is that the weather can change, and you may notice as well that it is getting a bit cloudy, but it won't rain. Not in Australia. If you get rain in Australia or Kenya, you are very unlucky. Extremely unlucky, because I'm pretty sure the chances of it raining in Australia and Kenya is very difficult. So you might find that this will end up being a lot shorter underestimate, just so you know. Oh, that's nice to know, actually. I'm happy about that. I'm happy to know that as well, because that's, I feel like I wouldn't say I'm providing my services, but I feel like I'm doing the world a load of good when people say that. So I appreciate that one, Maxie. Thank you. I know even though you're in voice chat as well.
Yeah, you McRae-a-thon, I believe it was called, was my first ever marathon, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's no problem. I mean, like I was saying, it's all those things like with events and with marathons, they get you into all sorts. You know, people are always there no matter what. There's always somebody behind the scenes and everything, and it's probably something that I could. I mean, from my perspective, what I've actually done with speedrunning over the last maybe year and a half or 2 years, maybe even further back to when I first started doing it again in like late 2016, early 2017, is I was often, before the Oengus and the marathons and stuff like that, I was often looking for a lot of marathons to try and stick my head in. You know, and it's basically like sticking your hand in a load of different cookie jars. A lot of marathons can be a bit specific. For example, some might only allow first-person shooters. Some might only allow Japanese games. Some might only allow horror games or racing games only. Obviously, my main forte is racing, so I often go for any racing marathons, but there isn't actually that many. So instead, I end up submitting to most marathons, providing I can enter it in some shape or form. And to kind of help myself get out there even more and to help enter a lot of marathons, I don't try and enter every single one, for those wondering. I don't go after everything under the sun. But I've done marathons that involve shooting games, I've done marathons that involve horror games, I've done them that involve action, and even games that had a really low Metacritic score. You know, stuff like that. So like stuff that you just consider trash worthy. Like the game would probably get like 2 out of 10 on IGN reviews. But, you know, a marathon's like, submit the worst games you can. And stuff like that. So, you know, I stuck my hand in a lot of cookie jars, to say the least. Did I look for marathons on SDA? I don't think I did. I think when I first looked at marathons for the first time, I'm pretty sure. Also, it's gone really dark. Good grief! I have to turn a light on in a minute. When it came to looking for marathons originally, I mainly looked on speedrun.com rather than Speed Demos Archive or Speedruns Live. I do actually remember. Because the weird thing is, I actually find, thanks to, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm constantly feel like saying this, but I feel like thanks to Oengus, marathons have now become so easy to find, like new ones to find and enter yourself in. Whereas like with speedrun.com, you go in the marathon section and there'd be loads, but the problem is that you'd obviously find event pages and things, but you'd often find that there are events that finished like 2 years ago on there. So finding new events on speedrun.com was, in my eyes, was a pain. So when everything started to move to Oengus and things like that, things became so much more easier in my opinion, and it allowed me to go, right, okay, let's enter this marathon, let's enter that one. And you know, like I said, speaking of like speaking of stuff like that, I was saying before, like how I expanded my horizons. So for example, I've done runs of some of the House of the Dead games. So that allows me to enter shooter and horror game genres as well as most marathons in general. Obviously, I have my racing stuff, so I can easily enter any racing ones, providing they're accepting them, things like that. You know, I've even done runs of games such as, let's see, probably things like, obviously Shar as well, but things like Kirby's Adventure. Granted, it was a blind run, but it's still a run that's on speedrun.com that I could use. Obviously, if I've done games for a blind run or a blind runners event, then there's a good chance that unless I've improved on it, I won't be submitting something that I've only done one run of. Unless I am that confident that run was just that good. I mean, for example, some of the runs that I've done on speedrun.com, some of the leaderboards I'm on, I'm the only guy on there. I think we've all been there. There's always going to be a leaderboard that you're on and nobody else has done a run of. For example, there's a gaming series that I've done. I say game series, there's only 2 games, but it gets classed as a game series, called Pursuit Force, and it was a PSP action driving shooter game where you could jump from vehicle to stop criminals. And the first game didn't really have anything done to it. But the second, it got a sequel just a couple of years later, and the second game was a lot better. But them two games are actually quite fun to play, in my opinion, and for the most part, there's only me on the leaderboards. Like, there's a guy called Hotline and a guy called TG. Can't remember the exact usernames, but that's just how I know them. And them guys have also done runs of this Pursuit Force. Whereas the sequel, Pursuit Force Extreme Justice, it's a case of, well, there's only me on there for the most part, apart from one particular category. Like, the full game runs, there's just me. Everything else, there's, you know, it's mainly just me that's sat on that leaderboard. Like I said, we've all, I'm sure everybody here has been there at some point and still is there at some point. So, there you go. But them games also allow me to get into different marathons as well. I also feel like this probably would be a good time to bring up, because we mentioned it earlier, McRae-a-thon. So as Axie mentioned before, McRae-a-thon is actually a marathon that we'd set up, that I'd set up with two other friends. And it had come from the idea that somebody had mentioned. So there's a guy called Deathmaster, or Deathmaster D, I think his username was. I think he's changed it now. I can't remember his new username, but basically a couple of years ago, so we're talking probably, I'd say 2017, 18 maybe? Probably 18 actually. Somebody approached me and said, have you ever thought about doing like a marathon based on Colin McRae? So I said, no, not really. I don't know how to run a marathon. So we ended up doing the first event called McRae-a-thon. And the first event wasn't a marathon per se. It was more like a relay of the first 5 games. That's now been turned into something called the McRae Pentology, which is basically the first 5 Colin McRae rally games, 1, 2, 3, 04, and 2005. You do them all in a row, with the total event run being like 6 and a bit hours. Currently, I have plans to try and get that under 6 hours if possible. And the other thing is, though, is like going back to this McRae-a-thon, it's basically a marathon that, like I said, myself and a few other guys, a guy called Joseph and a guy called Hypnotics, set up. And Hypnotics has been fantastic in working with us. He's only recently, in the last like 2 years, come on to the team with myself and Joseph. Myself and Joseph run the like behind the scenes for the most part. This year being our best event yet. So we've had, I think we've done 4 runnings of the event, although I say it's 3 because the original was just a relay thing, that bit like, you know, the is it the 5-on-5 that they have with like Crash Bandicoot and Mario and stuff? It was a bit like that, the first event. So I wouldn't really class the first marathon event as a marathon. It was just a relay. So the second event was actually the first, if you get what I mean. And we have had an absolute blast running the event. Like, for example, we've actually changed a few things that we've done when it comes to accepting game submissions. And as Axie was saying before, you know, like we had Shah was in that marathon. I think, what was the category you did, Axie? Can you remember?
All street races.
Was it not all story missions? I can't remember.
Oh, it was all street races this year. I think we talked about opening it up for ASM next year, but
yeah, I think it's. Well, that's the thing. It's like, you know, at the end of the day, it was. I mean, we obviously had some ground rules. So originally, the event's kind of gone under a lot of changes since its first event. Not just because the fact that the first one was a relay, not a marathon, but the fact that originally it was all Colin McRae Rally / Dirt, which is what the series is now. For those that don't know, it was mainly them games that were only allowed. The second time we ran the event, or I should say McRae-a-thon 3, as it was known then, was actually more a case of we opened it up so that it would be general racing games in the fourth iteration, or I should say the third event, that one got opened up further. It's still kind of held off on what games we've allowed, but this is the thing, is that there is some marathons out there that are like that, so we're not the first to turn around and say, you can't do this event because you're not doing, that sort of thing. It's just some marathons are like that. Also, this stage that we have literally just been doing for the past minute, stage 3 in Kenya, this is actually a demo stage. For those that have never played the game before, probably won't know about it, but if you have, and you leave the game running, the game usually runs a rolling demo. Obviously, a lot of games have it, or have had it in the past. I don't know if they still do it these days. I would have thought so. But some of the stages that they show off is, it's always the Ford Focus that Colin McRae drives in this game. But the main thing to point out is that you've obviously got you've got Kenya Stage 3 as one of the stages. You've also got Sweden Stage 1, and I also believe the UK Stage, Stage 4 or 5 or something. I'm not 100% sure. But there are like some of the stages from the game in this game, and the car driving around in the background. So there you go. The more you know. But yeah, like I said, the McRae event has gone down pretty successfully, and it's also allowed us to open things up a little bit as well. But yeah, for those that didn't know, as I've just seen in the chat, is that, so the Dirt series, the Dirt Rally, Dirt 5, Dirt 6, 7, 25, whatever they call them in the future, is still this original game series. So the way this came about was the game series started off in 1998 with Colin McRae Rally. 2 years later, this game released. 2 years after that, Colin McRae Rally 3 released. Then you had 04, which released in 2003. And Colin McRae Rally 2005 that released in September 2004? Yeah, I don't get it either. But then again, it's like the FIFA games. They released next year's game the year before. Yeah, I don't get it either. But anyway, so after 2004, the series went on a bit of hiatus, and Codemasters was like, right, we want to make a better game. We want to make a better Colin McRae game. We still want Colin McRae's name on it, of course, but we want to make sure that it's it's something that we want to take it up a bit, because at the time, the PS3 and the Xbox 360 were coming out, and Codemasters knew that it was their chance to jump everybody else in terms of the racing game market. Obviously, Electronic Arts had Need for Speed, and Criterion Games had the Burnout franchise, and obviously, Rockstar was working on GTA at the time, or GTA 4, should I say. And, everyone was getting prepared for the next generation. It's like, look, we really need, to kind of push this game. Whatever it is, we're going to need to push it. So they asked Colin McRae himself, would you be all right giving us some feedback? We want to make sure that this next game that we make, which will have your name on it, is one of the best ones we've ever made. And so started the Dirt series. Now, unfortunately, for those that aren't aware, Colin McRae died in a horrendous helicopter accident in September 2007. So the game had released in, I think, Dirt 1, the original one, so Colin McRae Dirt as it was known, released in September 2006, I think it was. And then, obviously, he died the following year, but he actually gave some feedback to the team before he passed away, and it was enough feedback as well, and the sales kind of showed it as well with the new Dirt, that they had enough money and they made enough profits and everything to create the sequel, Colin McRae Dirt 2. Now, Colin McRae Dirt 2 is the last game that Colin McRae ever put his name on. And also, as well, it is the last game that he ever showed up in, because of the fact that, obviously, I think as Codemasters, and as I'm sure a lot of people would have probably felt the same way, it would have been very distasteful to keep using his name long after his death. But yeah, so in Colin McRae Dirt 2, the game was entirely different. Like, you you're in the United States. You obviously traveled the world, and they had like a rally tour and everything. And the way they paid homage to Colin McRae in that game was it was a very nice way of doing it. So they had a video montage that I'm guessing Codemasters have made with Billy Clyro's Mountains song being played in the background, and it was showing off like Colin when he was being world champion in 1995, and it was a really nice tribute from the Codemasters team. And what ended up happening was they also put in 2 events. So they had an event which allowed you to drive. You end up winning. I think after you beat the World Tour, you actually get Colin McRae's 1995 Subaru Impreza WRX that he used in the World Rallying Championship. Yeah, so you win that, and that can be used in the rally part of the game only. But you actually unlock an event where you have you also win a Ford Escort Mark II, which Colin McRae famously drove on the Isle of Man in 2006 at the Manx Rally, which I believe was the last time. I don't think he attended it in 2007, or maybe he did. I can't quite remember. But he famously drove on the Isle of Man in 2006 at the Manx Rally. It was just this like, I want to say like a ruby red Ford Escort Mark II from the 1970s, and it had Colin McRae Motorsport, because at this point he'd started his own brand of sports clothing and shoes and t-shirts and hats and everything like that. Yeah, so he was obviously wearing all that gear and things like that. And he did the rally and everything, and the car that you actually get in Dirt 2 is that Ford Escort with his classic livery on it. And you also unlock, when you get this Escort, you actually unlock a event, which is called the McRae Rally Challenge, I believe. The McRae Rally Challenge is, I think it's like 4 stages or 3 stages set all over the world. You drive his Ford Escort Mark II. You can change the livery, but I always keep it in the traditional Colin McRae livery that you get it in, because I do like it. I think it looks great in that livery. And you go up against several big names. So in the game, you have huge names such as Dave Mirra, Ken Block. There's Katie Justice. Oh, I don't know whether she's real or not. I think she is. But you have a lot of famous faces, and in this Escort event, you have even more popular names. You have like Jimmy and Alison McRae, Colin McRae's dad and brother. Phil Collins, who I believe, not the singer Phil Collins, there's a rally driver called Phil Collins from Ireland, who actually raced against Colin in this Manx Rally Championship in 2006. So his name's in there, and obviously there's a load of other guys as well. That they also got in from Scottish rally, Scottish motorsports and stuff, like David Coulthard from Formula One. His name's in there. And this was actually a genuinely, what they do with this event is genuinely true with what they do in real life, because they did a McRae event in 2008, I believe it was. And there was like a Subaru meetup as well. And something that I can actually mention is I have actually met Colin McRae's dad and his brother. I've met Alison McRae twice, once at a rally event, and the other at a big motorsport event in the UK called Goodwood Festival of Speed. I managed to meet Jimmy McRae, who was also I think it was a 3-time British rally champion himself, when he used to race the Ford Sierra Cosworth and the Metro 6R4, and back in them days when you used to have tobacco liveries on cars and things like that. Not now. Come on, don't do it. Not now. I think might have another problem with me game. Seems like the thing's done its thing again. Oh, well, there we go. Yep. Oh, so I think might have. Hang on a second. See if I can get the car moving. Can I get the car moving? Doesn't seem like I can. Hang on a second. Okay, right. So
Do we
that
have
was
time for a quick donation?
we have done. Yeah, we can do.
Oh, we had a 100 Canadian dollar donation here from LP3 Cinema saying good luck to everyone in the marathon. Glad to see us all come together. Not Shah, lol. Also, Axie sucks. I agree with that. And that was for Save the Children.
Unfortunately, my controller's done the same thing. So I'm going to have to... Unfortunately, I'm going to lose my progress, but I can actually do the last few stages. I don't know why my controls decided to do this out all days. It did this the other day as well. I do apologise. I don't know why. Seems to be my equipment is failing on me, which is great, isn't it? Ooh. I'll probably find a way out with this. So I'm going to have to quickly just do something 1 second. Unfortunately, that means I'm not going to be able to finish this run as I intended, which really sucks because that's my controller that making the problem. Ah dear. This is not a good thing. I'm going to have to get this fixed. So I'll have to just do the last few stages as I would normally do, fortunately. So just have to kind of pretend that I'm still racing, I guess. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about this because my controller clearly hasn't helped or anything like that. So normally we would do the last 4 stages and everything of the game, and normally what would come up is you would have a you would have a fireworks screen come up at the end, which will say you'd won the championship. Unfortunately, this game has this problem, it would seem. Well, sorry, my controller has this problem. If your controller disconnects during a stage, it seems like what it likes to do is it just cuts off completely and you can't use the controller anymore. I don't know why, it just does it. It's like it just kills the controller for some odd reason. So that's great. But I can still show off the stages that we've got left. It still gives me time to show it off. The other thing is, as well, is that I do have like a single rally mode, so I can actually show off what the last 5 stages would look like, and you're still getting what the run would look like too. Just have to kind of forget the fact that I've, just kind of lost an hour and a bit there. Obviously, I will not be restarting the run from the beginning just to get a full run, so it's just going to be exactly what you would see otherwise, unfortunately. And whatever weather we get for the UK is whatever weather the game gives me as well. So you still get the dynamic weather in the single rally mode. It's not just a case of, you don't just have the, what is it? Normally, you'd obviously have the dynamic weather going throughout the championship. But, yeah, in this case, we're just going to have to live with whatever we get. In the single rally mode, you can obviously... You play with dynamic weather in the single rally mode. However, in single stage, you can pick the weather. And considering that the weather was looking nice on stage 3 anyway, it's definitely worth me doing this and making sure everything goes fine. So... what is kind of bugging me is how the hell that's just happened. I have no clue. So I'll have to find out what's wrong, unfortunately. So that's Italy done and dusted. So I might as well, like I said, I'll do what I said I was going to do. So go to the UK. So what's the weather going to be like? Any good? It's going to be nice. Okay, bravo. Hehe. So now that Italy's done, and out of the way, we're on to the UK. Now, if it starts raining, that'd be nice. But if it stays dry, that would also be nice. I guess I must be very lucky when it comes to dynamic weather this time around. So the UK is actually full of shortcuts that we take. So we cut behind a lot of trees, we cut behind a lot of bushes and things like that. And you may have noticed as well, as I said during this run before, is that what's ended up happening is is that we end up shorting the gearbox. Now, we never used to do this. We had used to use the standard gearbox. But, unfortunately, the standard gearbox is decent, but when you consider that you've got a lot of hairpins and things like that on various surfaces, you are better actually using a shortened gearbox. Now, there are, like I said, there are a few little cuts and things like that that we are going to be using. For example, we're going to be cutting behind here, jumping this hay bale, and with a bit of luck, there you go. This is actually cutting half the stage. Almost half of it. So you can actually cut behind hay bales and everything in this one. Also, the flickering may be more in the UK than anything else, so I do apologise for anyone, again, that might have photo epilepsy. Like I said, what you are seeing is what would usually happen, because like I said, normally the championship is basically single rally 8 times with all different rallies, but you just do it consistently. Fortunately, I've never had this game break on me before. I think I've had it crash on me once or twice, but it doesn't happen every single time. Like, honestly, this game is very least likely to crash, which is odd to say for a game that made in 2000, but again, Silent Patch mainly fixed that, so there you go. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is shorter, not too short. And I will actually mention a very fun statistic, fun fact for everybody. So, in later games, in Colin McRae Rally 3, 04, and 2005, they actually reused some of the stages from this game in them games, except they were given a slight makeover. How do I know this, you might think? Well, if you go into the game's files, you won't find anything different. However, if you go into the game and you observe the layout of some of the stages, they're exactly the same. Some of them are just the reverse version, but a lot of them are exactly the same, except the start and finish might be slightly further ahead or behind. For example, one of the stages in Colin McRae Rally 3, 04, and 2005 is actually one of the France stages in this game, but it's been rehashed, redesigned, and your start and finish points are a bit further into the stage and a bit further at the end of the stage. So, for example, you start at like where the second checkpoint would be. You'd start at like where the second checkpoint would be, right? In this particular stage in France. But in Spain, it'd end up being something completely different. You know, it'd be like you'd start there. That'd be the start line, and then you'd start elsewhere with the rest. So there you go. So this is actually the main stage which I can bring up, this is like the main stage I can bring up as to like how broken things can get at times. It's pretty ridiculous. But this is the main stage that I was on about, where I was saying it's like reverse. So in like Colin McRae Rally 3, 04, and 2005, this stage is in those games, except you're driving the stages in reverse, and there's obviously a lot more trees, the graphics are a lot more updated than this game, and that's pretty much all there is for that stage. So yeah, the more you know. I think everyone's probably learned a lot of new stuff today about this game and some of the cars and the rallying. Like I said, it's just unfortunate that I've had my controller go bust for some weird reason. But hopefully I'll get that fixed as soon as. I'm still using the controller now. I can use it. It's just for some reason my keyboard decided it didn't want anything to do with the controller then. I don't know why. So it's very bizarre. Usually you unplug and replug the controller back in. That's usually how games work. You unplug and plug back in, bosh. Doesn't work with this game, and it doesn't actually work with a few games either, which is a bit disappointing. That I found. I don't know why. But I don't know. Maybe my USB port's going, so I need to get something better. Either that or it's the controller cable that's going. I don't know. Who knows? But hopefully, it's hoping I can get it fixed in the near future. If you got anything you want to mention about the charity, Axie, feel free to go right ahead, by the way.
So, we have 3 charities that we're raising money for today. We have Trevor Project, which is a non-profit organization that focuses on suicide prevention among the LGBTQ+ community. Save the Children, which focuses on improving the lives of children through better education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, as well as providing emergency aid in natural disasters and other conflicts. And we have 350.org, which is an international environmental organization addressing the climate crisis. Its stated goal is to end the use of fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy by building a global grassroots movement. And we have so far raised £102 over the 3 different charities, which is pretty cool.
Also, just to mention, so Stage 4 has a very unique trick hidden up its sleeve. So allow me to introduce one particular trick that I can show off with this car. There's also another trick that I'd like to show off if I've got the time to do so. It'll literally take like a minute, if that. Depending on what this runs like. So we actually go in between this gap here, and turns out that can push you outside of the map like that. And then there you go. We're now outside the stage. So what we're actually doing here is we're driving on the opposite side of the lake. And if I keep going, if I get to this point here, so I go through these bushes, drive over here, it will respawn me on the stage, and I've already beaten half the stage through that. Just like that. That easy. As you can see, I'm 54 seconds ahead of the AI. So when I get disqualified in the super special stage, it will also show that... I'll show you what happens when you get disqualified as well. You actually you build a huge gap up by just doing that. So that out of bounds thing there was actually found by somebody else. So it wasn't a runner of the game. It was somebody that... a runner knew someone, and he said, "Oh, I've just been messing about and everything like that." And he ends up saying, "Oh yeah, well, you can actually get out of the track by going like this." I was like, "Ooh, okay, I wonder if we could use that." So after a bit of tinkering about and finding a sweet spot or a certain part where you need to go right, you could actually beat this stage even quicker than originally thought. So it actually saved like, I think it's about 10 or 15 seconds more than doing it by flipping a car and going over the bridge and everything like that. Also, time is going to be when I get disqualified. So as soon as the camera changes, that will be when time is. Oh, the gear changes. Thank you. It is worth noting as well that in the super special stages, you actually have there is actually a bug with the controller where it doesn't pick up direct inputs for some reason. Don't know why that is a thing. It just seems like it can never be fixed. And time.
GG.
It wasn't a complete run like it should have been, but that was literally the whole run. That even included the stage. I mean, granted, I didn't do half the stage. I'll just quickly explain as well. So the disqualification glitch, how it works. You can see on my screen now the splits. Forget the bit that's on the right, just the bit on the left. That's my time that I just did. So I got disqualified at 30:39. Because of that, it doesn't show what time you got in the first lane. So because of that, you have a 0, but you're immediately given 3 minutes. And as you'll see, I'm now at the bottom of this list, 3:30, whatever it is. And the guy who's first, McRae, was 1:55. Because of how big an advantage I had through doing the out of bounds and all the rest of it, you can see that we still win the rally by, 2 and a bit minutes. And it's very OP. There's also one final thing I'd like to show off, if that's okay with you, if we've got time to do so.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of minutes if it doesn't take long.
So, to kind of show this off properly, and I absolutely love showing this off, I'll be honest. So we have the Mini Cooper. The Mini Cooper is tiny. It is also, because of how small it is, it has a really small hitbox. That means it can fit through tiny gaps. And this is how good it can do it. So on UK Stage 4, when you use the Mini, you can do this for a line. So you can fit through gaps that big. And the next bit I'd like to show, now there is another strat that I could show off, but unfortunately I can't get it consistent, so I won't show that off. But the one that is most commonly known and is very exciting to watch. So we're going to put the car upside down, like that. Also, guess what's just decided to go bust? Controller done it again. I guess it is the controller. Nice, nice. Always doing it. I like the fact that that happened then. It had to happen then, didn't it? Just I wanted to show that off. Like, please? Could you not do that? Right. Try that again. If this goes one more time, this controller's going out the window. You have my word on that, by the way. Right. Hopefully I can show it off. But like I was saying, hopefully it better not cock up again. Especially by the looks of it. Doesn't seem like the controller's even being picked up this time. Sod it, keyboard it is. Right, let's do... I'll use the keyboard for this one. Don't like using keyboard, but whatever. Also for this, right. Right. So, as I was saying, we're on keyboard, old-fashioned way. So yeah, as I was saying, so the Mini can fit through very small gaps, and this will show off exactly how small of a gap it actually goes. Like how small it can really go. So, okay, not like that. Come on. It's alright if I damage this thing, don't worry. It's fine. By the way, for those that don't know, so the Mini Cooper was actually in the World Rally Championship back in the 1950s, 1960s, and it did actually win rally events. It was famously known, there we go, as it falls back, sweet. It was famously known as like a David beats Goliath situation. And the David beats Goliath situation was simple. It was, well, small car took on a bigger car and won. So here's the out of bounds that you can do. I hope we get this first time. So you get to go out the stage like this. This was found by a guy called Lucky. He's no longer doing runs of the game, but he found this. And it was brilliant. And it shocked us all. So by driving this way along the bankment, like so, without flipping the car, hopefully I can do it, there we go. And if I drive alongside this river, check at the top right corner with the splits, look what's going on now. So it turns out the triggers are outside of the stage. When you drive into nothingness, there's the end of the stage like that. Just like that. And that is how you beat stage 4 faster than you should. Now you can actually use... it's possible to use the Peugeot 205, which is the fastest car in the game. I won't show that. And you can use the Seat as well. There's been a new strat that was found, which is when I get to the bridge, just before I get to the bridge, it is possible to drive down the side of the embankment, round the trigger that resets you back on the stage, and drive down the side of the stage, out of bounds, and eventually to the finish line. You can actually beat the stage in less than 1 minute. Which is absolutely phenomenal, really, and an amazing find. I think it was Matique that found it, the guy that's got the record. But yeah, that's Colin McRae Rally 2. Just want to quickly say thank you to the Shark community for putting this event on and for allowing me to run this game. It's been a pleasure. Apologies for the controller disconnects and things that have gone wrong, but these things do happen and can go wrong. So I do apologise on that front. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again for the next time. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of the marathon. And yeah, I'll hand it back to Axie. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very good one there. And just quickly, we have had a £30 donation from Tilbert13, simply saying money.